First off, thank you very much for being here. We are actually really happy to have you, and that you spent your time here with us. And just to begin with, can you give us like a little rundown, like what is your name and what do you do?
My name is Debbie Ormonde, and I'm the president of Be Finally Free, which is a local nonprofit that works with people within jail, prison, the mission, people that are caught up in addiction, or they're trying to find different ways to change their lifestyle. So what we do is go in and teach, educate. That's the biggest thing, is if we can educate them on what they can do differently, it changes things. Well, the fentanyl crisis is just, as we all know, is unbelievable how much is happening. But what we do is we go in again and educate. Critical thinking is really important. And so we even talk to them about that. How do you make choices that are going to be good? What do you got to look out for? What happens when you're clean for a year, but all of a sudden somebody comes up and they show you something, you're triggered? How do you deal with that? So that's how we deal with it. If they've came out, they need help, they need addiction help, we're there to walk them through it.
For you, what is the number one way our community can, just keep combating this, or hopefully even stop it?
The number one thing is for us to understand how real it is. I don't know if you saw, Jelly Roll did a thing on to Congress, and he talked about it. It was how many people die every day is like an airplane crashing. And he said if an airplane was crashing every day, we would really be concerned. But because it's addicts or young people aren't looking at it exactly the same. And just because it's an addiction, we need to look at it as a crisis, not an addiction, a crisis.
Yes, that is a really good title, especially because it, as you said, it's affecting our young people, and in very different ways. And what are your thoughts on specifically the challenge this makes for the youth, for young people?
Well, some of the challenges I see is that a lot of youth don't know how to deal with the emotional things that they deal with. And sometimes there can be the emotional problems of stuff that's going on in their household. It can be stuff that's going on in their life. It can be stuff that's going on in high school where they're being bullied or whatever. And so instead of dealing with it with help, they deal with it by turning to drugs to help medicate that. It numbs them and it feels good for a moment, but the problem is still there.
How do you think we as the youth can spread the awareness and like your organization does, educate people on on the dangers of this crisis?
You can do exactly what you're doing, that you're talking about it, you want to do these different PSAs, you want to do things to get the school to hear what's happening and get it in front of the youth, being social media, because that's a great way to be able to do it. And that's going to help, because people need to just keep talking and talking and talking about this subject. So one of the events that we do that really help acknowledge and educate our community is called Light a Candle for a Loved One. And we put posters all the way around the lake at Riverwalk Park, and it's posters of people that have either died or struggling, or are ones that have been in recovery for a while, and we're celebrating them. There was a girl that came out to the event, and she's been using fentanyl for a while, so I walked along with her. She likes fentanyl. That's what she looks for. She's not getting it by accident. She's actually looking to purchase it. And so I took her to one of the signs, and it had a date of the birth date and the death date. And I said, if you don't stop this next year, your picture could be here. And right then, she looked at the picture, she saw the girl, she fell on her knees, she just started crying, and that was a year ago. And this year, she came to light a candle, and she's clean and sober, and it was just amazing. So sometimes it's the reality of what this drug does by seeing somebody's face that's already gone. Well, I think we need to get really serious, and we need to be honest, because I did 6 funerals in 2.5 months. That right there is not something that I had to go get help for myself from dealing with that many people, to get coached and to be able to continue doing what I'm doing, because it's so unbelievable that these children and kids and young adults are dying, and it's not stopping. It just keeps increasing. So we got to keep talking. We've got to keep educating. We've got to get mad about it, because I got to be real, I'm mad about it. So when somebody tells me about fentanyl, I can feel myself get mad. And not because I'm getting mad just because I want to fight. It's because I'm mad of what it's doing. And so we can't just turn our backs, and we can't just think that's happening in somebody else's house. That's another thing, because it's happening in every social economic area. It doesn't matter in our city if it's Seven Oaks or Oildale or East Bakersfield. It's everywhere. And that's what we need to understand.
And that's a reasonable response to it, because it is such a big problem. And sometimes we may feel like people aren't giving it the real, or the real gravitas it really has, aren't seeing it as a real issue. So yeah, it is true. Sometimes we have to give it a more real approach, more aggressive approach, if it's necessary to stop it. Do you think that's good?
Anything else you guys want to ask? Anything you want to say?
Well, I do want to ask, because a lot of people, think about this, and you mentioned a little bit about it. How do you think people can really, you're doing it yourself, but how do you think people, or like you, that really are mad about this, that really want to do something about it, how do you think they can make a difference?
They can make a difference by getting involved. So they have to decide where that is, what might be good for them. I work in prison, jails, and admissions and educate there. And then I take and use some of these men and women to go talk to other people. And when they're clean for 10 years and they've been able to do it, and then they can also tell their story of what they went through, then that's a really big impact. And I was sharing with you earlier, this thing that's happened in our city in the last year, two children dying, young children, of getting into their parents' fentanyl. And this is a problem that's not just affecting that person that's using the drug, it's affecting their families, it's affecting, our community, everything. It's not just a one person or, multiple people using the drug. It's all of us that are affected by it.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective, and people have to realize that not taking the drug is not the only way to deal with this.
That's exactly right. Not talking. I talk to my grandchildren. I have 10 grandchildren. I talk to them about this. I say, you know what? Even at school, if you get a headache, you don't take something from somebody. You don't go to them and say, do you have some aspirin, and have it go to the office or call me or call your mom, because it's not even that I think somebody wants to do that. Sometimes it is literally an accident. They have something and they don't even know what they have. And so that's why it's important to really be proactive in everything that we do with our families, our kids, our young people, and let them know the dangers of all of this.
Yeah, very true. So I think that would be a wrap. Thank you.
Oh,
The way you share things, you really make the message feel passionate and powerful, and that's what people are looking for. People are looking for something real, not not a sugar-coated message. We really want to make people understand how real this is, and with that passion, with that care, I think we can do it.
Yeah. And it's funny because we're talking about fentanyl per se right now, because that's the awareness that you're working on. But drugs in general, you'll see people, and because I work in prison, there'll be people that'll come up to me and they'll say, this drug ruined my life. I didn't die from it, but it ruined my life. I'm in prison because of it. And those are the same people that said I would never have killed somebody had I not been on this drug. And you go, wait a minute, don't blame the drug, but then you realize that drugs turn you into something that you're not. And so that's why it's so important for people to understand that it doesn't matter. Fentanyl is really important because people are dying right now, but all drugs change who you are.
Yeah, and we have to stop normalizing that change, and really do something about it, because it's not normal. It's not something that should happen, but the only way to get people to stop is to really let them know, the dangers, and also give them the help they need to do so.
And that's why I said originally, when you can deal with your issues and your problems and your emotions and really get help with that, then we're not so quick to have to feel like we got to numb ourselves. Even grieving. If you lose somebody that you love, you grieve. but we want to cover it up and make it go away faster. It doesn't go away. You have to work your way through those emotions, and that's a hard thing because we don't really learn that.
Yeah, and see, that's a great detail. We want to stop this before it becomes a problem in people's lives. We don't only want to help the people that are already struggling with it. We want to stop the future consumers of all these drugs. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to educate basically young people before they get into this, or in the early stages, so that we can prevent something worse from continuing to happen.
When you're detoxing, one of them is alcohol, and so that's how bad that drug is for you. And so if you've never seen a withdrawal of somebody in alcohol, it's horrific. And so these problems that I keep running into, especially inside of prisons and stuff, it's so bad because you don't know this. I'm just sharing this with you so you'll know. Is my niece was murdered at 17 in a cornfield in Indiana, along with 3 other people. It was on America's Most Wanted and everything, and it was all behind a guy who was high on meth. So you see, there's this problem is we have an epidemic in our country. It's so big.
Yeah. And you mentioned statistics, and people say, oh, it's just some numbers, how is that gonna do anything? But it's the way they're used.
Yeah.
Statistics for statistics' sake isn't going to do anything. You're going to hear about, this many people dying. You're going to be like, oh, well, that's just a number. But it's real people. If we give the number with the stories like you do, in that walk and light a candle, you really get a different effect, because it's not only statistics, it's the people behind those numbers.
Yes, because I take the letters that he has sent me, because I've actually met with the murderer several times, and he sends me letters, and in his letters he'll say things like, I know that you're talking to people, let them know this. I'm doing 3 consecutive life sentences in prison because of my drug use. You see, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. It ends your life. Doesn't have to be in a physical way. You don't have to die from it. It ends your life either way.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It really does. That's why, what's the old saying? Used to be dare, just say no. That's how it should be. Just say no.
Yeah.
My name is Michelle Compton. I'm a clinical pharmacist at Kaiser Permanente, and I work on different quality projects around opioids and benzodiazepines and other medications that might be risky for older people to take. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid or a synthetic narcotic. We don't make fentanyl in the United States. It's manufactured outside the United States, mainly in China, some in Mexico. So it's coming to our country across our border. And I honestly feel that we cannot get a handle on the fentanyl crisis until we do something about this drug trafficking across our border. Well, the medical community is trying to do their part to decrease their patients that are taking opioid prescriptions. They generally don't prescribe fentanyl unless you're in the operating room. But we do a lot of work around deprescribing or trying to taper off patients that are taking a lot of opioids or narcotics, which are in the same family as fentanyl. And we also educate our physicians to not start new patients on a lot of opioids unless they really need it for maybe a surgery, and to limit it to a small quantity. You can become tolerant or where your body's used to taking opioids just within 2 weeks. So we want to try to limit new prescriptions to less than 2 weeks. Well, around the medical community, what they're doing is many of the urgent cares, the emergency rooms, they all have an agreement amongst themselves that they're not going to just refill opioid prescriptions because they don't want more opioids out in the community where maybe kids are getting them out of their parent or grandparents' medicine cabinets. But as far as the youth taking fentanyl, I think the number one thing you can do is just have conversations with your kids from very young age until they're teenagers. You have to talk about it frequently. You have to explain the risk. You have to explain it to them year after year. It can't be just when they get in high school. I think our families just need to talk to our kids more and more. The second thing you can do is teach anyone that's willing about Narcan. Teach them how to use Narcan. You can get Narcan at a lot of free places. Carry it with you in high schools or anywhere where kids might be experimenting with drugs. Between urgent cares, emergency rooms, primary doctors, they all have an agreement that they're not going to write new opioids. They're not going to just refill them as people come in, because patients or drug-seeking people are going to find the weakest link. So if they all have the same agreement, they're going to get the same message no matter where patients are going shopping. I'm not real sure why our youth are so willing to experiment with a lot of different drugs. I think what's lacking, like I said earlier, are just those constant conversations. You have to teach kids from a very young age. I know some elementary schools have CPR classes for kids, and they can talk about why you would need CPR or why you would need Narcan. They just have to start learning about it at a young age and learning that the risk is you can die from it, even from the very first time you ever try it. Well, I have learned that if you ruminate something through your mind for more than 3 minutes, you can start manifesting it. So for kids to learn good coping skills, I do think they have to start telling themselves more positive things and telling themselves things that they can start coping with whatever issue or trauma they're having. And one thing that my teenage daughter mentioned to me that kind of surprised me was how common it is for kids to learn about suicide on TikTok or social media, and they feel like it's no big deal to them. So I think as parents, we have to talk to our kids about what it really means to try a drug for the first time and potentially die from it, what that means to yourself, your family, your friends, that it's a serious consequence. It's not a lighthearted thing that they may have learned about on TikTok or social media, that it's a real serious consequence. One thing I've told my kids since they were very young, when we're driving around and you see people laying on the sidewalk or sleeping under the freeway, I've just told them for all these years that drugs are the quickest way to ruin your life. So I think that we just have to teach these kids from a very young age that drugs can ruin your life or end your life.
Good job, Dr. Compton.